been exploring what it means to be human, but it could be said that the stories are exploring not only the human condition, but the human potential. And there's a story already told that reveals an aspect of this potential to us. It's a story about that young seeker after truth who studied the scriptures and the ancient text for some time before it came to his ears that there was a famous sage living in a far distant place. So he made the arduous journey to arrive at the abode of this wise man. He lived in a simple hut in a forest clearing, and when the young man arrived, he sought his tutelage and became a part of the family, helping with the daily chores, but basking in the presence of the sage and his teachings that were imparted. But the sage and his wife were very old, and the young man had been with them some time when it was discovered that the sage's wife was pregnant with a child. But as the pregnancy advanced, the sage was called to go on a pilgrimage, leaving his wife with the potential birth about to take place. But the young man undertook the task of caring for the woman and the household in this situation. But the midwife arrived because the birth was imminent, and the young man stood outside the door to keep guard, you might say, over what was happening. But as he was standing there, suddenly a being arrived at the door, and the young man said, "You can't enter there. There is a woman giving birth in that room." But this being explained to the young man, "I am Brahma, and it is my duty to write on the forehead of every child who is born their destiny, their fate." So, rather taken aback, the young man, of course, had to admit entry. But he said to Brahma, "Brahma, what is the fate of this child?" "Oh," said Brahma, "I cannot tell you until the moment it is written." So the door was opened and Brahma entered, and then the young man heard the cries of the newborn inside. And then Brahma came out of the doorway, and the young man stopped him. Tell me, what happened?" And Brahma said, "I will tell you on condition that you tell no one, otherwise your head will burst into 1,000 pieces." So the young man promised he would say nothing. And Brahma revealed that what had been written on the forehead of the baby was that he would live in poverty. All that he would have would be a bullock and a sack of rice to sustain him. So when Brahma left, the young man was surprised. How could it be this wonderful, learned, good sage could have a son that was going to be born into poverty and need? But in pondering on this, he came to the conclusion that, yes, destiny and fate was unchangeable, and so he let it be. Until some time later, when the sage's wife became pregnant once again, and again the sage was called away. The young man was left with the duty of taking care. And this he did again. He stood outside the door, keeping watch. And again Brahma came, and this time the young man admitted entry. But when he came out, he asked again, what is the fate? What has been written about this child? And Brahma said, this child, a girl child, is destined to become a prostitute. The young man was shattered. How could this be? His beloved sage, firstly, to have a son that was going to be born to poverty, and now a child that was going to be led into prostitution. But time passed, and again the young man thought about fate and destiny. And then it was time for he himself to leave, not just on a pilgrimage, but to seek further knowledge of life. And so he left his beloved sage and he wandered the world. He, after some long while, became a great sage, wise in his own right. And then he was called to return to his master. But long years had passed. When he arrived there, his old master was gone, along with his wife, died some time since. But the young man now, himself coming to middle age, wondered about the fate of his master's children. So he went and sought out the sun. And sure enough, when he was pointed to the abode of the sun, he found that it was just a hovel, that the sun was like a coolie. His only possessions were a bullock, and he was sustained with a sack of rice. He went to the door of the house, and he asked the young man who answered the door, "Do you recognize me?" The young man, of course, said, "No." But the sage now said, "I am the student of your father, your great master, father. I can help you if you will." And the sage saw that the young man was living with 2 malnourished children in a state of great poverty. And of course, the sage knew that he only had 1 bullock and a sack of rice, and he said, "If you will, go and sell your bullock and give your rice to the poor, keeping only that which you need." Well, of course, the young man was taken aback. He didn't want to give his only livelihood, but he recognized something in this sage. So he did as he was told. And after a while, the sage came back to check on what had happened, and the young man revealed that every day he had sold his bullock and given away his rice, and every day he got up to find another bullock in his barn and another sack of rice. So now, having affirmed, of course, that the young man was doing what was bid of him, the sage asked him, "And what of your sister?" The young man began to cry. "Oh, my sister has put us to shame. She is now a prostitute in a nearby town. Shame, shame. So the sage left the young man and made his way to the village where the sister lived. And sure enough, he found her living in a little house where she had become the town prostitute. He again went to the door and asked her, "Do you recognize me?" And she said, "No." But again he said, "I can help you, if you will." And with that he explained to her, "From now on, you must not answer your door to anyone other than the one who will give you a string of pearls." Now, of course, the woman was loath to follow this. How would she live without doing what she did? But seeing something in the sage, she promised that she would follow his advice. So that evening, instead of answering the door to those who came and knocked and could not answer when she asked, "You can only enter if you give me a string of pearls," there was a moment when there was a knock on the door, and it was expressed, "Yes, I have the pearls." So the door was opened, and the god Brahma, bearing those pearls, entered. Now, when the sage returned, he found that this woman was following his advice every day and night. She would only answer her door to the one that bore the string of pearls. And so it was that the sage, it seemed, had completed his task. But he sat under a large tree for some while to ensure that this was established, and then he rose early as the sun was coming up one day to embark on yet another journey. But as he was walking down the road, he saw coming towards him a shining being, a great illumination about its form. But this being was leading a bullock, carrying a sack of rice on his head and a string of pearls over his shoulders. When they met, the being said, "Oh, it's you who have forced me every day to bear this sack of rice, to lead this bullock, and to go to the house and enter it with a string of pearls." And the sage said, "Yes, this is destiny, fate, but if you will allow them to lead an ordinary life, not burdened with destiny and fate, then there will be no need for you to lead the bullock, carry the rice, and bear the string of pearls." human potential. What does this story reveal to us about this? An aspect of the potential of being human. What is fate, destiny, kismet, karma mean for us now?